I, 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 I. He got fired from Kane, now we ain't got no shame. So we started a pod, Chuck Yates needs a job.
Hey everybody, welcome to Chuck Yates Needs a Job, the podcast, in my continuing series to figure out why we almost had blackouts this summer. Sean Kelly was cool enough to come on, and let me see if I can pronounce this right. Amperon?
You got it.
There we go.
I mean, we made it up out of nowhere. So my co-founder coined it. We're like, yeah, this works. And so we'll be like, Amperon. But when you're playing with energy, amp is a good route to start with.
I like that. Yeah. I still struggle with Aegis. It's spelled AEGIS, the guys that help with trading and hedging. And
I know who they are, and I would have for sure pronounced that incorrectly.
Yeah, no, exactly. So anyway.
It's hard making up names, but every other name is like taken, it seems. So...
Well, that's the running joke that every energy company today is a pharmaceutical name because it's like, okay, let's get 7 random letters together and we'll cut 2 letters out of there. No vowels, or whatever.
Pfizer drilling. No.
So real quick, tell me who you are and tell me about the company. What do you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. Sean Kelly, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Amperon, and we started the company in New York back in, end of 2017, early 2018. And we're venture capital backed, and we've moved headquarters back to Houston because that's where all good energy companies should be based. And what we do is demand forecasting. So on the electricity side. So what that is we go in and we say, how many meters do you have? And you say, I am a big energy company and I have 50,000 meters. I say, great, I'll take everything. And so we take those meters and then we give you a forecast on the short-term basis that over 15 days updates every single hour and tells you this is what I need to buy next hour and the next hour and the next hour. So you can imagine back to February of 21, we were very wrong. As 35% blackouts, we do not calculate outages into our platform, but that's what people look at is that 15-day forecast. And then we have a 5-year forecast. And the reason a 5-year forecast is important is because of the energy transition. So if you have rooftop solar, your house no longer looks the same. And so we would forecast that every week and be like, oh, Chuck's house doesn't look the same anymore. He obviously put solar on his roof. Great. Now here's what your energy company should buy for the next 5 years. So that's what we do. And then we started in Texas, went right next door to Australia after that. Okay. So we met them on LinkedIn. They were like, our grid is totally screwed. And we would love you want a big load forecasting competition. You want to come hang out with AMO, which is the Australian energy market operator. Think ERCOT for Australia. And then after that, we launched in PJM, New York, New England, and MISO. So covered the East Coast. And then we launched Alberta, Canada, California. And then we'll close out the year with Southwest Power Pool. And then early next year, we are headed to Europe. So electricity, a megawatt's a megawatt, doesn't matter where you are. And we want to forecast it. So that's our thesis and what we do. And it's been a really, really fun journey coming up on 5 years now.
No, that's cool. So basically what you're telling me to make sure I understand is, let's use ERCOT as the example, because I know a little bit about ERCOT. I mean, ERCOT basically has power generators. Then you've got power companies that in effect sell retail, to consumers of some sort. You're the software that's telling the power suppliers how much they need to go buy because this is how much.
Yep, exactly. There's 2 parts of everything, right? Supply, demand. And so we focus on the demand side. So our big client base is retailers, and we also have some municipalities and cooperatives in Texas. So we cover, there's 11 million meters in all of Texas, and almost 2 million of them are on our platform. So we're telling everyone, here's what you need to do, about 2 million homes. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool sales journey, better than I would have expected if you had asked me 4 years ago.
So I had Campbell Faulkner on the podcast, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or something. And we talked about how the grid got to where it is. We went through kind of deregulation. We're pay for power only. We kind of sleepwalked into looking up, and 35% of our grids renewables. And okay, that's part of the problem here. But that's really kind of the generation side on it. Is there anything we can do on, and we talked about prescriptions. How do we make it better? We need more base load. Maybe we change the system where you can be a renewable, but you got to pay a penalty for not being dispatchable, whatever the case.
Yeah.
I would think, given your insight on consumers and stuff, is there anything we can do on the demand side of it to not have blackouts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and let me throw one more thing at you.
Go
I'm sorry,
for it.
I'm cutting you off.
Jeez.
Because back in the day, I started my career as an oil and gas banker. And in 1998, I think oil went to $12 a barrel or $8 a barrel. So I had to figure out something else to do. So I Googled internet and hydrocarbons and ran around and was a power technology guy because that sounds way sexier than oil and gas. But we kind of had this thesis about the grid and just if we're going to move from a world where the grid powers a mechanical device like your refrigerator and you have a glitch, who cares? It cycles on, cycles off, nothing bad happens, to a world with microchips.
Yep.
You had to have reliability. So I actually spent some time on the grid looking at demand and all. And my punchline to you is I don't think anything's changed since then. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the power lines outside your house are the same power lines outside your house. So I would agree and disagree with that, but I love the fact that you said you looked at oil and when it was like $12 or whatever a barrel, and you're like, I got to find something to do. So I did the same thing. It was March 31st of 2016, and I was trading at a small prop shop in Chicago. So I spent my first 11 years as an electricity trader. And so no one knew what an electricity trader was. So people were like, hey, so what do you think if Facebook stock's going to do? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't honestly care. But I walked myself out of there when it hit $1.61. I was like, this is a terrible way to make a living. And I had another company that I've since sold that was going to like these big commercial buildings and helping them understand like, hey, this is how like you can reduce your demand, but also how you can lock in your demand because it's $1.61 natural gas. It's not going to be here forever as we sit in a $9 environment now. So went and helped people like lock in those like 5-year contracts. So yeah, pretty interesting that you were like, this is not how I want to make money. And I did the exact same thing in 2016 and then started a tech company. But with that, back to the pros and cons of like what's changed on the grid. I think a lot's like from an infrastructure side, not a lot has changed, which is why behind the meter, so much has changed. And so infrastructure, power lines, they're there. They're not getting upgraded. Like you're in it to win it. The grid is 100 years old. Was very, very forward thinking at the time, but those days are gone. As we know in Texas, getting like, where is the wind? I didn't see any windmills driving here from Midtown to your office. There were no windmills for some reason. Maybe I went the wrong way, but it's all in South Texas and it's all down on the coast, right? And so there's not power lines to get it to Houston, where we are, where everyone lives. There's not power lines there's more so to get to Dallas just because West Texas is all over there. But it's just the infrastructure is not there. So that's where you've got to kind of come back to like the behind the meter. And that's making your house more efficient. My home was built in 2020 and it's 10 square feet smaller than the home I grew up in Sugar Land. And so my electricity bill is half what my parents' is because we've got 1989 versus 2020. And so things are just so much more efficient.
Like what are some of those things?
I mean, they do everything from like the windows, the insulation, and then you can like the appliances, but then you can also go deeper and be like, hey, guess what? The new Inflation Reduction Act just passed. And so you can put solar on your roof and they're going to pay you like $9,000 to do it. But then you take the counter of that, like, and you're going to plug a Tesla in your garage or a Ford Lightning, which everyone's obviously very excited about in Texas. And you can get a $7,500 credit for that. So all of that type of what's happening at your individual meter is changing a ton. And that's why Amperon's important, because we are paying attention to every single meter and running a new forecast for a little over 3 million meters now across the United States every hour. So that's what we're paying attention to. And then you're going to see the next step of like telling electric vehicles how to charge. Like once this EV penetration everyone wants so bad, like they built a truck, you can actually get Texans on board with something, as opposed to, I don't see all of Texas trading their F-250s for Priuses.
The soccer mom's car.
Yeah,
That's always
exactly.
So Colin McClellan's take on electric vehicles is he's really bullish on them because they're just great cars. I mean, I drove a
They're
Tesla.
fast.
Oh yeah, it's like souped up. There's no wheels are spinning.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so anyway, he is bullish on them because of performance. But
Yeah.
his knock on them is, why do they all have to look like soccer mom cars?
I
Why can't we
completely
have
agree.
something that looks cool?
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're heading that way. Like getting Ford into the game is definitely helpful. People who actually know how to make cars, right? You've got EV companies and they're trying to make, like, again, at times I agree, they can look soccer mom cars, spaceshipy. That's a word. And then you've got like, hey, I still want what I have. It's like for me, for instance, I've got a 1-year-old and wife, and I have no idea that when you have a little, like, I don't know, 23 pound human, they come with 4,000 pounds of crap. And so I didn't know that. It was not in the owner's manual when he was born. And so we have to have an SUV. But I also need an SUV that can get to like visit my brother in Fort Worth. And so I need a long battery. But like looking down the list, like the Rivian's like 96 grand. The Tesla X is like 120K. Like still running a startup here, ladies and gentlemen. Like not exactly.
We haven't had that liquidity.
My Ferrari budget's a little low. So yeah, you've got to do that, and you've got to make one for the everyday people. They said the average EV, and this I think includes hybrids, is $54,000. We got a Jeep Compass that we got for like a little under 30. Like that's a big jump there.
Well, pre-pandemic, we sold 7 million cars a year in the United States, give or take. 6 million of them were 40 grand or less.
Yeah.
So if they want to
the
make
average is 54, yeah, you got to find
the
something.
penetration rates, you got to get it down below 40 if you want to hit that.
But the EV thing is crazy. Like I remember in high school, like laying out all the like Motor Trend and like Road and Track and everything, and we'd all sit at the lunch table and go through and be like, this one cracked like 4 seconds, 0 to 60, whatever. And it's like some souped up like $250,000 car. And now you get the Tesla like Model 3, like the cheap one, the everyman car, and you like tap that thing and it's just done. You're just off like a rocket. So yeah, I think from a performance standpoint, not having to get the oil changes, the like all of that, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's definitely going to hit. But back to what we talked about earlier, power lines are still the same. So my whole street gets them, your whole street gets them. You all roll in at 6 o'clock and you're like, yeah, I'll go ahead and plug it in. You're done. It's lights out. You're finished. And so that's where you've got to have somehow people at home understanding the different signals of like when they should and shouldn't be doing things. So I think.
And doesn't that have to happen at an AI level and not a human level?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because if I show up and, if it getting in the way of me grabbing a beer, plugging in, I'm not sure that's going to happen. But are we going to have, is that where we're going to go? We're going to have smart homes where you in effect have something sitting there going, all right, now it's time to charge this. Now it's time to shut off the refrigerator.
Yeah, I think it has to be that. I'm not going to text you and be like, hey bro, it's over $500. Do you mind? You're like, I got people over. There's no way, like throwing a party, not happening. Like you've got to have that little bit. Like if you go out of town, like, yeah, raise your house. Like we just got back from 3 weeks in New York. Guess what? We had the house on 85 because it wasn't like, but I had to do that by hand for whatever reason. They didn't put a smart thermostat in the house. And so I had to like literally go push it to 85, but you don't want to like manually do that. And you don't know when. You're not sitting there hitting refresh. Like, when it's hot outside, but if it's really hot outside and there's like 10,000 megawatts of wind, it's not a big event. If it's pretty hot outside, but there's a bunch of power plants out and there's no wind for the day, then like out of nowhere, you think it's fine. And then the price goes through the roof. So that's where it's a little different. You've got to be able to tell the everyday person about market signals, which is what I think that's also what gets us to like on the path of like the energy transition and all the like net zero goals that the country has.
So how far off are we from that? Is that 5 years, 10 years, 27 years? Does the technology exist today? It's just costly. Where
Um,
are we if you had to handicap that?
let's see. We're in 2022. I think about 10 years. I think you could get there. Because the other thing you've got to think about is like, as with smart appliances and things like that, when do you plan on getting a new refrigerator?
Yeah, good. I have no clue. Yeah,
When
never.
that one breaks?
Yeah, never. Exactly.
When the beer's
yeah.
hot? And
Yeah.
so, great. Or so if you don't have one, or you may be like, okay, we're going to move this one to the garage and then like whatever. But like at the end of the day, like you've got to wait for these things to take its like natural progression. When are you going to get a new car? I'm going to like, when this one breaks, when like kid starts driving and you got to do a hand me down, like whatever, you're not just going to like trade it in every 6 months or whatever. And so I think that's the thing, is you're going to have that full life cycle. So I think like a 10 to 12 year standpoint is helpful. And I do like what's happening with the Inflation Reduction Act, because now it's saying like, hey, it is expensive. Like it is pretty expensive. I had a really good deal on my electricity, and sadly the contract ended. It was from one of my early clients. And so now I have less of a good deal. Still like very nice hookup from one of my clients, but it's getting expensive. And so before that, I wouldn't think about putting solar on. But also if I had an EV, which I'm considering, and I had solar on my roof, okay, great. And like some of my appliances are pretty smart because the home's pretty new, and like some are just not. And like the thermostat, no clue how they stuck that in there instead of a Nest when they built the home. And so, yeah, you just kind of look through these things. But what I like about it is that they're like, hey, I'd like you to buy a clean car. Here's $7,500 to do it. And you're like, 54,000 minus 7,500. Like, all right, like it's a little bit easier, right? And you're like 56 or 46 and a half. That makes it a little easier. Like solar, I'm not sure if I'm going to put it on my roof. Hey, we'll do like, here's the overall cost savings plus $9,000. And you're like, okay, this is a little more advantageous. So that's the type of thing, because it's expensive to outfit your home to like fully do all of this. And so that's why places like California do it first, because it's really freaking expensive to have electricity out there. So they're dealing at a number that's like 2 or 3x what ours is for the end user. And then we're like a low ball, but now ours is getting higher. So we need to start paying attention.
Yeah, I think dad put in solar panels and the Tesla batteries at the house just because my dad's the early adopter. Dad bought the first VCR ever made, but then he never upgrades. That's always kind of been
still
Dad's
watches
shtick.
the VCR.
Yeah. So anyway, he got solar panels and the Tesla batteries, and his payback was about 12.3 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. And, my comment to him was like, dude, you're 80. So I've told this story a million times on the podcast, but I'll tell it again. So Winter Storm Uri,
Yep.
I'm sitting there in Richmond, and I'm in between the police station, the fire department, and then whatever Oak Bend Hospital.
Uh-huh.
So I think I'm never going down, right?
Yeah,
I'm on
yeah.
the part of boom, goes down.
Yep.
So I show up over at my parents' house. I got my cat in my cat carrier, bag under my arm, walk in, sit down, and Dad under his breath's like, 12.3 year payback doesn't sound so bad right about now, does it? It's like, all right, fair enough, Dad. But
that's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it would be. So I think I'm going to make this as a statement, but you correct me if I'm wrong. So everything that's happened on kind of the residential side, what you just said, your bill is half of what your parents' bill is, same size house.
Yeah.
Had to have happened on the industrial side as well, maybe even exponentially more, just because there would be more savings.
Yeah. I would say it definitely does, but there's only like so much you can do. Like if you have a brewery, then I guess I'm just really thirsty. If you
I brought up beer first.
You did bring up beer first. But yeah, so if you have a brewery, so you're sitting over there and you're like running Carbach, right? And so like there's not much else you can really do to lower that. You can do a little bit. So where that comes in, here's the big thing. So we have in Texas, and you probably covered this with Campbell before, you have 4 CP. So 4 coincidental peak. And so that is, there's 15-minute period, one in June, one in July, one in August, one in September. And they look if you're a commercial or industrial client and see what your usage was. So that's the highest load on the grid. So when we tapped over 80,000 megawatts on the grid, it was that 15-minute interval, the biggest one for each of those 4 months. So each of those are worth a quarter. And then that's how the next year CenterPoint tells you this is what your transmission or like TDSP charge is going to be. So if you act appropriately and you have some flex, even at a brewery, like you don't want the beer to go cold, but nonetheless, you can also stop manufacturing, stop canning, all of that. So you say, hey, I normally use 5 megawatts. I can take that down to 1. And then CenterPoint will be like, man, they're great guys over there. Like they only used 1 megawatt. So then they get charged on transmission for 1 megawatt for the rest of the year. They're normally at 5, but because they were well behaved, those 4 15-minute periods, then they get a huge savings. So that's the savings that you can do like here as a commercial or industrial client. So on the energy efficiency side, it's less so because like you're making beer, you still got to make beer. But that's where you can come down and you can massively back down your transmission by telling ERCOT, look, when things get tight, I'm happy to be like a good advocate for the grid. It's essentially you're selling insurance. So you're like the insurance provider for ERCOT, and you can even submit into these demand response programs. Then you have to back down when ERCOT calls you. And so ERCOT will call and be like, Carbach, like back down, stop making Love Street. You're like, oh, okay, great. And so they'll do that. And then you'll back down to the like predetermined amount that you agreed with ERCOT on, and they pay you as an insurance provider. So that's where commercial can really be a good steward of the grid. So I think there's it's a big two-way, but like, I think it's like 3,000 megawatts on the grid that can actually like back down. And that's also what these data centers, that's what like Governor Abbott is like trying to draw these data centers in, because the data centers can like instantaneously almost be like, stop mining and then just drop down. And so there's I think it's like 3 gigs in the queue for data centers as well.
Because so I had Nathan Magoo, who is CFO of Besa, which is an oil and gas producer, but really their focus is Waterfloods. And I don't know if you know much about how Waterfloods work, but think just a massive plumbing operation.
Okay.
Where like 1% of the fluid you're skimming off is oil and 99% of it's water.
Okay.
So you know how you get soap out of a sponge?
Yeah.
You run a bunch of water in there and you squeeze it, right, to get all the soap out. Well, that's kind of what a water flood is underground.
Interesting.
If you will. So think of a big plumbing operation, tons of electricity, right?
Yeah.
And he came on because what he wanted to talk about is he's like, hey, I was in the LARS program for ERCOT every year, right?
Yeah.
And they would call up and they'd say, hey, got an issue for a couple hours, please shut down. We'd do that. We'd get paid. It worked out great.
That's a great program. That was the first gig I ever had, was managing that at Tenaska.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it had all these big, massive plants, and it was awesome.
Well, what Senate Bill 3 from 2021, the response to Uri that makes everybody winterize and stuff, came in and said is if you produce more than 50 MCF of natural gas, you are deemed critical.
Yeah.
And part of the LARS program, one of the things you have to qualify is you are not deemed critical by anybody. So all of a sudden, these massive water floods that have loads of 25 megawatts, 30 megawatts, 35 megawatts, but they make 52 MCF of natural gas are like, we're deemed critical. And, And so, the Railroad Commission just blew that, right? It should have been, hey.
It's kind of what the Railroad Commission's good at.
Yeah, exactly. Blowing things. Anyway, so what the Railroad Commission should have said was, hey, if your load is way more than the gas you produce, and we'll figure out some metric to convert it on, you're not deemed critical. Their claim is we're going to figure this out kind of through the hearing process. But the flip side is, does somebody want to spend $500,000, $1 million in lawyer fees to go through a hearing process when it's like, I don't want to shut down anyway?
Yeah.
And so the LARS program had about 3 gigawatts participating in it. And after Senate Bill 3 passed and all, got down below 2 gigawatts participating. But
Yeah.
and I don't know if this is in any way, shape, or form has anything to do with my podcast, but post the podcast, I think we're back up to like 2.6 or something.
Okay.
And the Railroad Commission has started hearings on it.
Yeah.
It's getting better. But yeah, no, it's interesting you brought that up, because I actually think there ought to be a large program for every single user of electricity on the grid. That it just doesn't seem to me the technology should be that hard. I mean, you guys are forecasting it.
Yeah.
So we know what's going to happen. We ought to be able to have the smart house say, all right, Chuck, sorry, but you told me if I could save X amount of money, I can take the house from 68 degrees to 75 for 2 hours. But it's been that way for 20 some odd years, and it hasn't happened.
So
yet.
There's a little bit, not really in Texas, but like California has a program that like Tesla created a program that just went, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is what we did. And I was like, OhmConnect's been doing this for a long time. Like they were kindly in our like Series A press release. Awesome company. And so they go in and they aggregate homes and then tell all the homes like, hey, if you do like Chuck, Sean, if you can do this for me, I'll pay you this. And so they put all of it together. So they've been in Texas for a little over a year. Really cool company. And so, yeah, it's possible. You can go become a user at OhmConnect. I know that they had like an investment from Google, and like because of that, they had like Nest thermostats they were handing out so they could monitor. And they've got little things in your house where they can actually kind of like not overly take control, but like a little bit take control. So yeah, there's companies doing this. ERCOT as a whole, they don't have the technology, and it'd have to be like the next generation of smart meter that also lets people take like control of the house a little bit. And then you've got all the like Texans that are enemy of the state fans, and they're like, they're not taking control of my house.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, there's programs out there. There's companies doing it. And like OhmConnect's one of the best ones I think of. In our world, it's called VPP, virtual power plant. And so it's exactly what it sounds like. You're by backing down, you're creating that excess. And if you create that excess across tens or hundreds of thousands of clients and everybody gives a little, then you aggregate it together and it's a virtual power plant. So yeah, that's something that a lot of people have paid attention to. There's I've got something in my inbox that I need to read about like how this bill affects like the VPPs out there. But yeah, it's definitely doable. And the home, like from an emissions target, getting the home to behave properly is like the last 20% is what I understand. And so that's where they're like, no matter how well we get, because commercial industrials, like the gentleman who was on here with like the LAR program, like, yeah, he's like making hundreds of thousands of dollars, like during those events, could be making millions of dollars. That's fine. At the home, you sit there and you're like, hey, I need to take my home from like, I'll bump it from like 72 to 74. But like, I'm not going to 78 with like a small kid. My wife will kill me, and that's not worth $6. And so I think that's where it is. But I would be like, don't charge my car, like don't run the washing machine, different things like that. So I think there's different degrees that each person's willing to do.
That's a good point, that maybe there's just not on a percentage basis, you could actually do something meaningful. But at the end of the day, if your electric bill's $250 and you save 10%, that's $25.
Yeah. So what I like is if they would let you take that power and sell it back to the grid, and you could be like, anytime it's over $1,000 a megawatt, that's $1 a kilowatt hour. And like, that's a big number. Most of the like plans right now are in the, like, I don't know, like in the teens, like 15-cent range probably.
Yeah.
And so if it's at $1, be like, I'm selling back. Great. And so I think if you did that and let people like game the system and be like, okay, if we're at the price cap, will I back down? And you give you that entire spread. That's where it's interesting. Or if like electric vehicles become like bi-directional charging, where you can say, hey, instead of I've got all this juice in my car right now, we're full because I charged last night and haven't gone anywhere, then you can push it back to the grid. That's what I want to do. I mean, obviously I was a trader for a lot of my career.
Right.
So I just want to sit out there and find as much arbitrage as possible. But that's what people are doing with like electric buses, for instance. Electric buses are great. When do kids go to school? Like, I don't know, 7 a.m. to like buses should be like hard stop done by like 8:30. So then if you had that, and then like, when do they run? Okay, great. You've got like the afternoon, but the whole rest of the time you can sit there and like act as a battery on the grid. That's something I actually find interesting. If you can use your car like from a bi-directional standpoint and like make money arbing the grid essentially.
Well, that was what I forget which hurricane it was, but my mom called me and like, being a good sweet mother, make sure you have batteries and blah 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 and all that. And back when I used to drive a Tesla, I was like, Mom, I got the greatest battery on the planet. If I need to go out, charge my phone or do whatever, you're right. Because it's so back in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was doing power technology type stuff,
Mhm.
The whole thought was, because the way the grid works, and everybody knows this, is you have one day, and it's usually in Texas, it's in August, where
Yep.
you've got the huge demand, so you got to have power for all that, because in effect there really is no storage.
Yep.
So the peaking component of it, one company we almost invested in, its whole mission was, you got all these backup diesel gen sets everywhere that sit around and do nothing all year long.
Yep.
Let's just kick those on for the hour that we need it, on that hot August day,
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be. So you've taken it the next step further and said it's car batteries, but there's a lot of generation out there that's backup that's never really used.
The best thing, I forget when this was. This was a couple years ago. The grid was just like, you see like the ERCOT map on the website, and it's like color coordinated, and when it's like dark red, you're like, we're screwed.
Right.
But Formosa down in like South Texas, the big, I guess, chemicals company, they flipped everything and like pushed all their power out. And so you had like the old the map of Texas, and like right here was a little dot that was like green, and everything else was just bright red. And they're like, we're taking care of our people, we're good stewards.
Nice.
And I was like, respect, like this is the coolest thing ever. And obviously like the big evil chemical company, and then they're like, save the entire neighborhood, what's up? So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, if you're big enough and powerful enough, if you're got the ship channel to do that or something, you're absolutely right. Like there is that capacity somewhere that we can make this work.
Who would ultimately be in charge of making that happen? Is that ERCOT that ultimately? Because at least back in the late 90s, the problem was you had a local utility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were fully vertically integrated. They had generation, they had power lines, and then they went all the way to the house. And you would think you were trying to steal their children if you said, hey, I want to be able to sell back into the grid. Oh no, it'll blow up, all these rogue generators. And I've talked to some networking type people that are like, no way, the technology's pretty easy. You can sell power back and forth. It's few inverters and it happens. So who actually is stopping this from happening today, if you had to guess?
I still think it's the technology. I still think it's just not there. And yeah, there's definitely not like ERCOT, like their goal is like keep the lights on. And so I always picture like the ERCOT control room is like, you ever watch like Rudy and like Notre Dame, and they go through and like they hit the sign and like play like a champion. Like every utility is like, don't let the lights go out. Like don't kill grandma. Like I'm pretty sure they just like have that sign like walking in. They're like, this is the goal today. Like keep the lights on, play like a champion. And so I think that's all they're focused on. And this next stage of like how we actually make the grid more resilient and all that. I think it's the thing, like part of the reason that Amperon's been successful is I don't even know what the overall value of our client base is, but it is, it's in the hundreds of billions, like of the companies that we work with. Like if you look at their market value, right? Our company is not worth that. But we're able to, there's almost 30 of us now. And so we started with 2, we were at 14 at the beginning of the year, and we made like 4 hires this week. So I think we're at 30. And so we're able to do things that like one of our big clients, I think they're worth like 40 billion. And we've been able to do stuff that they're not able to. And so it's because in startup world, you can be fast and nimble and make a decision and like hire the top talent, because you can tell them that you can let them work in Texas than Australia. And if they want to work remotely, we let people work remotely before it was cool. And so you have this talent that isn't going to go work at the utility. And so that's where I think the difference is that the utility's job is to keep the lights on. It's not to be innovative. It's just like, don't screw up. And so I think that the innovative people are me of the world and like why I'm definitely like passionate about more venture capital getting to Houston. Because if we're going to fix this whole energy transition mess, all the talent's right here. All the people who know how energy works like live in Houston. So we're the ones who should fix that. So that's why I think also is just like these big companies, you just can't get done. You can't get stuff done. You have a meeting about the meeting for the meeting, then you have the meeting, and then you have the post meeting, and then you're like,
circulate the notes from the meeting.
Circulate the notes. Like we didn't take notes. We got to redo the meeting. And so that's what there's no bureaucracy in startup land. And so you get to go out there and just get stuff done.
So, we used to always say when I was running the private equity firm was, half our job is to make money. The other half is to not look stupid. Right. And so, if you're ERCOT and the lights go out, you look really stupid.
For sure.
So
this is not how they wanted to get popular.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Sean, you moved the company from New York back to Houston, and I have a big belief that all energy companies need to be in Houston.
Yeah.
What was the thought process there? And
yeah, I mean, Houston's very, very business friendly. Outside of the fact that our customers were here, we got an 11% raise on our take home because of no state and city taxes from New York. It's easier to hire here. Like the cost of living is so much better. I mean, all the energy talent's here. So we have, of our roughly 30 employees, I guess 8 are in Houston. So we actually like flew a couple of people in. Our next biggest makeup is Boston. We've got a few people there. And then our Boston, New York, I think there's 3 people in each. And then we've got people overseas, like everywhere. So we started the company remote. And then again, remote got cool. But when COVID hit, we were hit firing on all cylinders from like day one. And so, but Houston it's a great place to have a headquarters. And again, half my client base is here. So I can very easily like see them go, like they're all, our office is in Midtown. I get to, I don't know, dozen clients in 5 minutes.
Well, and you said earlier though that you had to almost start in New York to be able to attract money, but that's changed. What have
that's
you seen?
Changing.
Okay,
and so, in New York, there's a very, very vibrant venture capital scene. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. We found a great, we could not have had better first investors, Nick and Alex from Notation Capital. They're in Brooklyn. And so they saw us and they were like, hey, this is a good founder fit team. We think energy's interesting. We know nothing about it, but we're interested in it. We think that this is going somewhere. And so that was the thesis. My co-founder, Abe, had no background in energy. And he said, hey, I like time series data. And I think that this is where everything's headed from the energy standpoint. And I see an old archaic industry. And I saw an old archaic industry but that needed technology. And so when in New York, you saw these people and everyone's like disrupting and co-founding and like all these things, like starting companies that are like apps and like selling advertisements, and they work at Google and they work at Facebook and all that. And I was like, so the grid's a real problem, like not to take away from any apps, but I lived my life for a long time without any apps. I've never lived my life without electricity. And so what if we took this really talented base of engineers and brought them to Houston and let them work on the types of problems that we're dealing with just with the grid. And so that's what we've done is we've hired these top engineers and data scientists, but then we're answering problems that the big clients, like our big clientele here, are paying attention to. And so, here's the basis of you've got, everyone. You look downtown, it's like Shell, BP, Chevron, like Exxon, like everyone. And so, we've just now that data science talent, that data engineering talent wasn't here. But unfortunately, we have not had a ton of success hiring for technical skills in Houston. There's commercial people for days and days. We've hired some of the top commercial people in the industry to come work on this problem. And but we're still getting better on the tech side. And so there's a thing we just started, like I went to A&M, and so called Aggies in Tech. So Rice does a pretty good job on the technical side. Their business fair or the business plan competition is unbelievable. A&M's doing a good job now. I was just there last weekend in College Station for a TRIP, trading risk investing program. And so they teach them to be like really high-end analysts, but they teach them Python, which is like the best language that everyone should know, especially people that are in their 20s and coming out looking for jobs. But then we just founded, a guy named Jesse Martinez founded Aggies in Tech. And so he's like, Aggies need to know that if they want to work in tech, they don't have to go to Silicon Valley. They don't have to go to New York. Like there's a home for them here, a much cheaper home. And so just bringing that tech talent back is helpful. But also if you go to venture, that tech talent will eventually want to start companies. It should want to start companies. That's who you want starting companies. And so you have to have that venture capital there to give them an idea. We raised $860,000 off of just an idea. And Notation was the one there to help us raise that round. And it spurred this. And now I employ a bunch of people and we have a good bit of revenue and a bunch of clients and saving people, I mean, millions upon millions of dollars, especially in these crazy events. And that was all because of like an $860,000 check from them and a few other people. So Houston needs to understand that if we're going to like fully embrace the energy transition, people need to fund it. And so everyone here knows what private equity is. Like, obviously that's your background, but those checks are like, have lots of zeros on them. Sometimes to see if you have product market fit, you just need $1 million or $2 million. You don't need like 50 or 100. And so that's where like venture really comes in. And so that's one of the things that I like that Aggies in Tech is hopefully bringing in. Greentown Labs showing up here and like the Ion showing up here is unbelievable. Like just the Cannons next door, just the fact that you now have all these investors who are writing these smaller like checks and angel checks, but giving people a good valuation and saying like, let me help you along the way. So that's definitely what that would probably be my next act, is go and like help early stage companies, just because I've been fortunate to have some good people help me. But Houston should not be as where they're ranked in venture capital funding. They're really high in private equity and really low in venture.
Yeah, I think what happened is kind of a couple of things. One, it was really natural gas partners that created private equity, and
Yeah.
it just gravitated to oil and gas.
For
And
sure.
when you have some success, what do you have? Copycats. So
Yep.
you had Quantum, Incap, et al., everybody else joining in, and it just got niched in there. And you had L.E. Simmons and First Reserve kind of doing oil field service, and that's just where it built up. And then I think what happened just kind of technology-wise is, and I've talked a lot about this on the podcast too, is oil and gas companies just have a tendency to be lottery ticket businesses.
Yeah.
Meaning, if I can drill horizontally and do a modern frac, I will spend all the money in the world and I will become so great at that because that's a lottery ticket. All of a sudden, I can be rich overnight.
Yep.
Digitizing my land files so that I can shave 10 cents off a land transaction, that's boring. I'm not going to do that. So I have paper and pen. And so we've just been kind of behind the 8 ball on certain aspects of technology. Because nobody was doing that, the oil and gas private equity guys never had any venture type opportunities.
Makes sense.
So you just didn't build that culture, you know?
That makes a ton of sense, actually.
Austin kind of has more of that culture, and you had Austin Ventures pop up in early days and all, but that's what
that thesis makes a ton of sense, and it does, but again, there's no reason we can't change it. And so again, from an energy, like Houston, I think especially energy is really good on a B2B standpoint from a business side, but Austin's really good at like business to consumer. I know they've taken some like big Houston companies and like that's the great city for like business to consumer, whereas like we can still be like the business to business. And obviously the Houston Austin fight's always gonna happen. Dallas never really showed up to the fight in the venture game. I don't know why. So
that's all right. We don't like Dallas. We don't like Dallas, so that's fine. I love that meme where it's like, let's build a wall and it's walling Dallas off into Oklahoma.
I'm totally down with that.
And I was born in Dallas, so I shouldn't say that. But no, I think when you just look at energy and kind of like the whole history of energy, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, is you really can't transition unless you leverage the existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think if we think we're going to have a hydrogen-based economy, okay, that's great. How can that happen in Boston? There's nobody that runs a pipeline company in Boston.
No.
I mean, and pipelines are potentially going to be used to move hydrogen
Yeah.
around or whatever the case may be. So it's got to happen here. And I do think that the Greater Houston Partnership's been really good about.
They've done a
identifying
great
it.
job.
Bobby Tudor's done a good job of
He has,
picking
for
that
sure.
up. And Jane Stricker's great.
Yep.
He's kind of in charge of it. So
Yeah, Bob Harvey's how I got involved with that, and he's CEO over there, and Bobby Tudor does a great job as well. But yeah, he literally, I sent him an email when I was a junior or senior in college, and it was like, Mr. Harvey, you are the best Aggie in energy. Like, what should I do when I grow up? And so he took me to lunch over on like Wasey's table and sat me down and was like, hey, this is blah, blah, blah. And so we reconnected, I don't know, probably like 5-7 years ago. And so it's been great to work with Greater Houston Partnership and just know that like a city like this has advocates like that. And also people of that caliber of the Bob Harvey, Bobby Tudor. Like, I mean, the fact that those people are giving their time to like help make the city great is really, really impressive.
yeah, I've always said, say what you want about Houston. It's an ugly city. I mean, right? It's basically flat.
It's flat. We made all our money in the 80s, so we're still getting rid of all the green glass buildings.
Yeah, we have the climate of a third world country. I mean, you know, I say all that, but I do say to anyone that'll listen to me wherever I am, no greater people on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean,
no greater people and now no greater food. The food is
Totally.
unbelievable.
totally.
So yeah, we went to an awesome dinner last night because my whole team was here and like the 10 of us went and I was like, man, this is great. And like, yeah, the dining scene here is phenomenal. I've lived in New York and Chicago and Dallas, and it's not like each city has its own, especially like New York and Chicago has its own like nuances in the food thing, but Houston can definitely hang. So no, it's fun to do that. We're in the Heights.
Time Magazine voted us the #1 food city in America. Actually,
awesome.
above New Orleans, above Las Vegas.
Man, above New Orleans that's strong.
Yeah.
So I love New Orleans food.
All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot to close out the podcast. Give me 2 predictions for what we'll call power technology. Give me a 5-year prediction that I haven't heard any other place, and give me a 10-year prediction of just something. I've given you something so wide you can drive a
Wow.
bus through it. So I haven't pinned you down that bad, but I have put you on the spot.
A 5-year prediction and a 10-year prediction. All right. 5-year, this may be like wishful thinking.
Okay.
I think in the next 5 years, we will not see another blackout event like we saw in February 21. So I think that ERCOT did a good job of managing things this summer for how hot it was. This summer was the like hottest on record since like the 1890s or something like that. And so they did a great job managing the grid. And now with the winterization of a lot of the units and things like that, because the issue was with gas and the fact there was no wind because the wind turbines were frozen and all of that, I do not think in the next 5 years we have another like event like that with the complete
We're on
and
the
utter
record.
black.
I like that prediction.
All right, so I'll go there.
I'll
and
take
then-
the under, but go ahead.
Again, might be wishful thinking, but you know, that was great. We were 6 months pregnant at that time and lost power for 48 hours.
Ooh.
So also, yeah, maybe in trader world, we'd call that talking our book.
Yes.
So a 10-year prediction. Let's see. We are in 22. So in 32, I think by 2032, I think Houston will be a top 10 venture capital city in the United States. So
And give me give me 2 things that need to happen for that prediction to become true. What do you think we're missing now? We've obviously, you brought up some good steps we've made, the ION,
yeah,
Greentown Labs. What else do we need to be doing?
I think part of it is just, in all honesty, valuations. They need to have fair valuations that give the person who's taking the risk, i.e. the founder, to put them in a good situation. People in Houston, because of private equity, are used to saying, like, what is my return on this? People want to open
EBITDA, boy. What's wrong with you?
Exactly. So I think that they need to work on that and understand, like, yeah, we got given $3 million of evaluation for an idea. And if we hadn't of, so we're like, okay, great. You got to sell. I mean, the going rate is 20-ish% of the company per round, especially in like the software base, because we don't have hardware. But I think valuation's getting better is one of the things. And then I think that you need one of the big players to make an actual stake in this. You need a Sequoia, Andreessen, like a Google Ventures, someone like that to come here and be like, we're doing this.
Open an office
and basically, because everyone follows, especially in every space, but especially in VC. Like for us, we went around and we had an early commitment from someone who is in or around Riverstone out of their Austin office, which is great. And then we got a term sheet, and then they just came. We got an offer, and then the term sheets kept coming in, and then people kept wanting to invest in the round. So once you got that sign off, then like, oh my gosh, so like HSBC led the round, and then like a bunch of other people were involved, but we got to turn away like a bunch of money, which was great because everyone's like, oh my gosh, they said Amperon's a good idea. We're all going that way. So if an Andreessen, like Union Square Ventures, like someone of that clout, when you hear like this is who it is, then like that I think would be the step. If one of them moved and said, we're going to open a Houston office and we're going to like actually like make a presence, there may be one that has a Houston office, but actually come here and make a presence, then I think that would really change the game. Because everyone follows. If one of those like massive multi-billion-dollar like VCs set down foot, all the rest would be like, what do they see that we didn't see? We've got to move to Houston. And then everyone would just follow suit.
So Mark Andreessen, you're welcome to come on the podcast. Come to Houston. We'll feed you.
For sure.
You well. And, it's been 2 some odd years that I've been unemployed, but I'll work on my resume for you, Mark. So how's that? Sean, you were great to come on.
Hey, this was awesome. This was a lot of fun.